Hello once again, everybody. I am Ethereal, and today I'm going to be attempting a tutorial surrounding nullsec mining survival. The first thing we need to understand about nullsec mining is that there are two types, high risk and low risk, and you need to fit accordingly. We're going to begin with high risk mining, and while this is applicable anywhere where you might encounter a lot of enemy ships, we're going to use Cobalt Edge as an example. Of these key points, we're going to begin with positioning, and this applies to both high and low risk mining. You want to be as far away from the warp-in point as possible with the belt between you and it. This puts both asteroids and distance between you and their arrival location. The asteroids could potentially decloak covert ops and get in their way, while forcing them to close distance before they can warp jam or scram you. You should remain aligned to something in space. This will allow you to warp off faster, but not something like this, as it's alone, and when you warp off, it's easy to see where you went to, and they may follow you. Instead, you'll want to warp off to something like this, as there are multiple items in that direction, and they may get confused as to which one you went to. Remember, when you warp there, you'll want to warp at distance. Not 100 and not 0, anything in between. And once you get there, turn 90 degrees in any direction and cloak. Drones can also be helpful. If you launch them at just 1 kilometer, they will force your opponent to have to bring up an extra interface window, which can buy you an extra precious second. When it's time to run, warp stability is by far the most important. If you get this number high enough, as shown here, then most ships aren't even capable of stopping you. Secondly is speed. Being able to speed through bubbles and crash gates is extremely important. You want to go as fast as you can. Keep in mind warp scramblers is the first thing an enemy will use, which will disable a micro warp drive, so I try to stick to afterburners. Even under scram and web, your afterburner will still improve your speed significantly. On to low risk mining. Once again, you're going to want at least 40 kilometers between these 2 points. With low risk mining, you're generally better off going for tank over escape, as you're likely going to have backup nearby, and barges can last a long time against most vessels that will be tackling you, generally frigates and such. This is also your more common form of mining, which means you're going to be spending a lot more time doing this, and you're much more likely to be AFK or caught with your pants down. It doesn't matter if your tactic to get away is cloaking or warping. If you're not paying attention to do this, it's not going to do you any good. A tank, however, buys you time to not only react, but call for backup. In fact, the tank on some of these barges can be so good that in the past I've managed to fight off both an interceptor and bomber simultaneously with just my 2 little drones without the need for backup. Creating a fleet to yourself and naming that fleet after the system you're in and SOS allows you to simply share your fleet so you don't have to waste time typing during combat. Shout out to Vaughn Corp here, as one of their guys helped me put together a little sparring video here, just to show an example of how well the tank holds up on some of these barges. Notice how it takes him a moment to close distance on me? Between that and spotting him in local, this should give you plenty of time to warp out. He actually tries to get a little wise here and attacks my drone first. This is great because it actually buys you more time while he's shooting at the drone and retargeting it, as all you have to do is recall your drone and relaunch it. As now recalling the drone broke his lock, now he must retarget and start over. You'll notice the medium energy neutralizer. I prefer the mediums, as it does more than enough to a frigate without doing too much to my own ship, as well as cycles more often, which keeps their capacitor down, possibly turning off warp scramblers and such. Ultimately, this fight took over 4 minutes, which even against higher DPS ships like bombers, faction frigates, or covert ops cruisers that do significantly more DPS, you're still going to last a good solid minute and a half to 2 minutes, maybe even 3 depending on their fitting, which is more than enough time for backup to arrive. Remember, fit only what you can afford to lose. Just because these might be the most likely types of ships to tackle you, doesn't mean that they don't have their own backup lying in wait. Nothing is safe in nullsec. Because this is friendly sparring, I stopped at about 25% armor on his ship. However, if you'll notice, even after this prolonged fight, he only got through a very small portion of my shields, and I never even bothered popping my 2 shield extenders. I hope you all found this informative, and fly safe, everyone.